Hi everyone, welcome to another vlog. So in today's vlog, let's talk about something that I haven't spoken about a lot, math, the quant. Because half the GMAT will be quant, so it only makes sense for me to speak a little about quant also. The reason I keep speaking about verbal is because that's where most students struggle. I haven't seen too many students struggle in quant. However, there are certain things you have to be careful about in terms of your overall approach or some common mistakes students make. So I'll address those in today's vlog. The first thing I'll start with is something very broad, the kind of mindset you require to answer GMAT quant questions. And this is not just for the GMAT, for any aptitude test. There's a big difference in the way you should approach quant on an aptitude test vis-a-vis how we used to approach quant in our school. In school, we used to get marks for the process. So even if your final answer was wrong, but you got your process right or partially right, you would get some marks for that particular question. However, on the GMAT or any of these aptitude tests, there is no mark for the process. If you got the entire process right and in the end you made a silly mistake, got the answer wrong, you get a 0 basically. If you got everything wrong, you just randomly made a guess and you got the right answer, you get complete marks for that question. So what matters on the GMAT is the end result. Can you get to the answer or can you not get to the answer? So the process makes no difference. Whether you do it the technically correct way or whether you back solve or whether you pick numbers, it makes no difference. Which is why what you should always try to do is take the shortest path, what I call the path of least resistance. Sometimes it can be doing it the technically correct way, sometimes it can be back solving, picking numbers, whatever it is, but the idea is to get to the answer in the shortest possible time. Because what I see students do a lot of the times is the moment they read a math question, they start writing and they start solving, which may not be required in a lot of the questions. You may end up taking more time than you should on that particular question type. In fact, that is what I tell everybody for quant. If you are doing too much of solving in any question or if you're making too many calculations, you're most probably doing it the wrong way. It's like what I said on sentence correction. If you're reading all the options completely, you're probably wasting your time. Same thing applies to math. If you're making too many calculations, you're probably doing it the wrong way because the GMAT rarely tests you on your calculation ability. It assumes that you will be able to calculate. It just wants to test whether you know how to approach the question, how to get to the answer. And the irony is, there are no marks for the approach. The marks are only there if you get the final answer right. But that's the kind of mindset you should have. So all I'm saying is, don't blindly or immediately start solving questions. Read the question, maybe ponder over it for 10 seconds and only then start to solve. Particularly on data sufficiency questions where a lot of the times you don't have to solve. Just going halfway through the question should be enough to give you the answer to a data sufficiency question. Sometimes you won't need to write at all. So focus on the answers, don't focus on the process. And for those of you who don't have a math background and who get very flustered as to how will I cope with GMAT math, having a math background is not a pre-criteria because all the math that's tested is your 10th grade math. So it's very basic stuff, most of it is arithmetic. In fact, most of the math questions on the GMAT will not be testing you on technical math as such. What I mean is, you don't need to know some complex formula to answer most questions. If you're good with numbers, you should be able to answer most quant questions on the GMAT. Which is what I tell all my students. If you've been using numbers as part of your work, you could be in finance, in marketing, wherever, but I'm sure you're working with numbers. And as long as you're good at that, you'll be fine with GMAT math. So don't worry too much about it. And by the way, when I say focus on the end result, don't focus on the process, by no means am I saying that don't try to learn the concepts in math. I mean, you have to learn the concept. And please get a good teacher or a good book because you don't want to learn concepts that won't be tested. So, the GMAT is a standardized test. It tests you on the same thing over and over again. And it's testing you on very limited things. So what I mean is, say something like mean. In mean, mostly what is tested is mean of consecutive or evenly spaced integers. So a person who's taken the GMAT will be able to tell you that, and you will be able to only focus on this part and not the rest of it, which most likely will not be tested. So within each topic, there will be a few things which the GMAT typically likes to test you on. So focus on those things, learn the concepts. So you must know the concept because that's the only way you will feel confident. But all I'm saying is, don't try to shove in the concept on every question you see by writing it down, by calculating, by just getting slowed down. I mean, a lot of the things can be done faster, and you will be able to do it faster because you know the underlying concept. So I'm not saying don't learn the concept, but don't try to follow the traditional way of solving questions in every quant question. Which would also happen if you study from a tutor who hasn't taken the GMAT, who's a traditional math teacher. Which is why I keep dissuading students from, studying from tutors who haven't taken the GMAT themselves. The other good thing to remember in math is that even if you get a lot of questions wrong, you can get a good score. I mean, you can get 14, 15 questions wrong and yet get a 48 or even a 49 out of 51, which won't happen on verbal. So as long as you get some difficult questions right and you don't get too many easy ones wrong, you will get a good score in math irrespective of how many questions you get wrong. That's another good thing about math. So you're not even trying to get everything right. I mean, you're okay with getting a few wrong as long as I'll get some tough ones right and I will not make too many silly mistakes. In fact, that's the one you have to guard against, the silly mistakes. It ends up costing you dearly because when you make silly mistakes, you will get easy questions wrong. When you get easy questions wrong, your score will fall much more. Getting tough questions wrong, as I keep saying, I'm absolutely okay with it. As long as you get to the tough questions, that's good enough. If you get them right, nothing like it. And if you get 10 difficult questions, you will definitely get 4 or 5 right, which is perfectly okay for a 48 or a 49 in math. So only look at perfection if you're seeking a 50 or a 51 actually. And keep in mind, the difference between 49 and 51 will not be more than 20 or 30 points on the GMAT. So if you actually want to push up your score, moving from a 49 to 51 is not that important. Your verbal score will actually be more important. So keep things in perspective. Getting a little more specific in math, between data sufficiency and problem solving, it is data sufficiency that will be the problem for 90% of students. Problem solving is normally easy, it is not very difficult, it can be done. Data sufficiency is tricky because they try to confuse you. The thing to keep in mind in data sufficiency is, one, don't try to solve every question, it's a waste of time. Second, don't mix up the two options, so the two statements basically, because it happens a lot. You read statement 1 and then when you read statement 2, you subconsciously end up using information from statement 1. In which case, sometimes I recommend to students start with statement 2. You will rarely see it happening the other way around. If you start with statement 2 and then you go to statement 1, very rarely will you end up using information from statement 2. I think it's just the way it's lined up that subconsciously, when you go from 1 to 2, you subconsciously end up using information from the first one. So if that's becoming a problem, try this approach. Start with the second statement first. But don't mix up the two statements. A few other common traps on the DS: if the question mentions integers, if x is an integer, don't just think of positive integers, also think of negative integers, which a lot of students don't think of. If the question mentions number, it doesn't say integers, then don't just think of integers, also think of fractions or decimals. Then you have those yes/no questions, where the question is asking you, is x an even number, let's say. And you look at the first statement and you see x is not an even number. And you think that's not the answer. But that is the answer. Because the question is asking you, is x even or odd? So yes is a valid answer, no is an equally valid answer. So don't get confused, because these yes/no questions sometimes confuse students. Yeah, so keep these things in mind. The last thing, practice regularly. I mean, I think this is something we've been taught from school. The only way to improve math is to practice a lot. So practice a few questions every day, every second day. In fact, if you go back to this video and watch it again, you will see a lot of similarities between what I've told you today and what I've told you in the sentence correction video. And that's because the GMAT math is a lot like GMAT sentence correction. There are rules, there are concepts, there are certain things which are tested over and over again. If you don't practice it regularly, you will forget the rules. If you're reading too much, you're wasting your time. So you see there's a lot of overlap between math and sentence correction, because the underlying skills being tested are actually the same. Which is what I keep saying, it's not math or English, it is those skills which are being tested. So it makes much more sense to focus on those skills. Now, I've mentioned some of those in earlier vlogs. Maybe a little later I'll do a separate vlog only about those underlying skills being tested on the GMAT, that you guys should focus on. But for today, the focus was quant. I've given you a lot of tips for quant. So please watch this vlog again if you want. Make some notes, and all these things that I've told you, try to apply that in your math prep, and you will see how things suddenly start to look much easier and much more manageable to you. So I hope you guys found this information useful, and I shall see you tomorrow in a new vlog. Have a nice day.